Hi everyone, and welcome to ProductTank. As the slide says, we're a community for product people by product people. And today spans over 190 sister cities globally. Our mission is to provide inspiring content and a supportive community to people defining and designing products. I really recommend that you check out the podcast attached to ProductTank. This is how I found out about this amazing group of people. My name is David Martin. I'm one of the organisers for ProductTank Brisbane, and I help support Jason and the others to provide these types of events to you. My background is incredibly diverse, like many product managers. I've done everything from being an exploration geologist, working in consulting in human-centric design, and doing mergers and acquisitions in the oil and gas industry. We all have very diverse aspects to our personalities and how we get here. This year, the Brisbane team decided we wanted to go on the road, having an event at one different company per month, getting insight into how different companies do product, and also putting some of our best on stage for the rest of the world to see. This month, we're joining SilverRail, who is part of the Expedia Group. SilverRail hosts the search and ticketing system for most of the commuter rail throughout Europe and beyond. They're a real hidden gem in Brisbane, and we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about how they do product in a B2B context. I'd like to invite Andrew Whiting, their Director of Product Management, to the virtual stage, who will be interviewed by Jace Clamp, who coordinates the ProductTank series across the Asia-Pacific region.
Thanks, David. Let me turn off this here. So, all right. And there we go. Andrew, it's great to have you here. ProductTank Live tonight. And really looking forward to hearing some of your perspectives on how you do product there. And I want to say to everyone who's watching, if you have any questions, how a multinational commuter rail booking and ticketing and search system actually does work from a product standpoint, as we have this conversation, pop your comment on the thread so that we can see it and we can pick it up as well. It's an opportunity for us all to learn. Andrew, if you just want to start off by telling us a little bit about SilverRail.
Yeah, SilverRail's been around in a couple of different guises in some ways. There are some stable businesses that a Boston startup called SilverRail actually acquired. So out of Boston, there's a ticketing solution, so being able to find and source ticket support traveller for rail. And they've acquired my business, or my part of the business, a supply channel of data for the UK data in particular. So my team look after the journey planning and fare finding in UK specifically, but we also do a lot of the city planning or city route management in cities that we live in. We used to do Brisbane, so those who use the TransLink app today, the version before that one, the one that we used to enjoy, that was done by my team. Auckland, I know we've got ProductTank in Auckland. We do the journey planning solution there that Auckland Transport put out, but also through the UK and Perth and other cities like that.
Awesome. So you're head of product management over there. I'd be interested to know how your team is structured.
Yeah, so within my part of the SilverRail product team, we report up through commercial. I think it's quite interesting to actually look at where a product team actually comes up into an organization, be it through technology or marketing. In our case, it's the commercial side of things. And this helps us really stick very close to the customer. The business goals are aligned. We're here to service travelers, but also to turn a profit. So that relationship's quite important to us. We trust the technical mastery off to the engineers. So my team are very much about the business, the traveller, and the end customer. So my product managers, in terms of what they look after, they're aligned with an engineering team. So it's kind of a project-based structure that we're running within the search part of the business. And this means that when I have work that comes in, objectives on the roadmap, projects and commitments that we have sold, it really gives the business the flexibility to use the right resources to get that work done. It does give us a lot of flexibility. So that teamwork, the ownership and effectiveness that we've got within a team actually allows us to have quite a range of specialization and skills across products. I don't have people who are just magical in one particular domain, and if I don't have work in that domain, then I struggle to get great value out of them. I'm actually able to use different people for different projects. It allows me to mitigate key resource risks. So I don't have magical one-person experts. I've actually got a real depth of expertise across the team that we can lean on. And it also helps clear our bottlenecks. So when I've got work, I've actually got lots of options as to how we go and get that work done. So pros and cons to lots of different sort of structures. This is the model that we find works best for us at the moment.
Awesome. So SilverRail, part of global Expedia Group, maybe excluding having just gone remote, which is a very important topic to unpack, what would you say your biggest challenge from a product management perspective is?
Intimacy with the customer. It is just, you can't get enough of it. So as I sort of described at the intro, a lot of my customers are overseas, and as you said, we're very strong over in Europe. So that distance for an engineering function and product function that's here in Brisbane makes things a bit more awkward. And I'm really proud of my team in how they actually work to overcome that. So in a B2B context, we end up not just with the geographic distance, but also the fact that we're servicing a business, an organization who is then supporting the end traveler. So we find ourselves 1, 2, and sometimes 3 steps removed from that end traveler. So how we build and maintain that sort of stickiness and intimacy with the customer is a difficult thing. It can mean calls at awkward hours, workshops that get run in very different ways, a lot of contact and a lot of effort from Brisbane to reach out to customers, but also working with our local sort of Boston teams or London teams, Stockholm teams, etc., to really join the dots together.
Yeah, that's something that we started to talk a little bit about on our interview on LinkedIn leading up to this event, how you use data to kind of uncover some new patterns of behavior and really then explore those and then take that into adding more value for the rail companies and the customer. The customers are the rail companies. So, and I'm sure that, when they partner with you and purchase a solution like SilverRail, they really want to know what's coming. What's the future road ahead of development and so forth. How do you handle roadmap, both internally and externally?
Yeah, we use RoadMonk as our primary road mapping tool, and we slice different views of that based on the audience. So the bigger picture definition is something that we share externally for sales opportunities and to help our customers understand where we're heading and why we're going in that way. From the macro level, I suppose, those major functional objectives we break down into their own sort of smaller roadmaps to actually show how are we going to achieve a particular goal. So it's the further out things we haven't necessarily groomed to an extent where it might have its own roadmap. Obviously, as it gets closer to needing to be done, we break down that work there.
Yeah. You kind of hinted at challenges around customer intimacy before. Last month, actually, we talked about shape up, and that's how sort of work is shaped before it's delivered, defined and explored and so forth. Maybe tell us a little bit about what your process is like as you approach delivery, that sort of shaping process that you use there at SilverRail.
Yeah, I think for me, there are 2 things that I'd share with the community. One is about spikes and how we use spikes and the value that they can bring. For me, using spikes wisely is a very important thing. You can get distracted and spike lots of different things and just waste energy effectively. It doesn't turn into something material. We use spikes for the purpose that they're there for, reducing the number of unknowns and really helping us size and plan for a task a lot better. And as I touched on in the LinkedIn interview, we also use that as a way to start putting together a bit of a prototype at times for what would we take to a customer. So actually having something tangible as a deliverable so that people can actually understand an idea, a goal, how we could service a particular need. So using spikes wisely, and the other part is remaining agile. So really looking at iterating quickly, being able to share and demonstrate our progress with our customers, be they internal or external, listening to the feedback that they share and then adjusting how we work within that. So it's not a waterfall-based approach. We're heavily documenting up front, etc. It really is keeping those agile principles close to heart.
Yeah, and if you have any viewers out there have a question, pop in the comments so that we can tackle it. Maybe let's nerd out for a minute. How about that? Like, what tools are you using? You mentioned RoadMonk, both from a standpoint of maybe ops tools, data that informs what you're, exploring and wanting to define, as well as, things like Jira and where the docs are put and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of Atlassian product at SilverRail. So we do use Jira and Confluence, I've gone blank, and we use the suite of tools in Atlassian that support the development processes as well. RoadMonk for things like road mapping. There's a lot of logging and monitoring that we build into our systems, but that we also plug into sort of off-the-shelf tools so that we can get that view on how our technology is being used, how it's responding to that usage, what are the patterns from travelers, customers, systems, so that we can build more data to make better informed decisions. Communication, Slack, and the video conferencing tools that we're all coming to know and love. And we've played with all of them, actually. So GoToZooms, all those sorts of things. And it is that need for good communication that really drives how we stick that intimacy to our heart.
Yeah. Yeah, and following on from that, we've all gone remote. Your team's all remote, working from home. As the leader of the team, you mentioned when we chatted last time, you've been reading about things that you can do to help with that. Maybe unpack that. What have you been doing, and what have you guys been experiencing with all of this?
Yeah, so we've rolled out a new HR system called Bob. That's actually really nifty. Bob's got some really cool employee engagement survey type of questions, and so we're making use of that at the moment, just as an anonymous temperature gauge for the team to be able to feed in on, have I got the right tools? Am I getting the right productivity I'd expect out of my work at home environment? All those sorts of things. From a leadership perspective, one of the things we're really conscious of is by working remotely, some of the peripheral contact that people have with each other just isn't there anymore. And we're all different, as you said at your intro, or as David said at the intro. Some people are more outgoing and gregarious than others, and particularly in engineering, you find there are quieter people who sort of slip through the cracks if we don't pay attention to just reaching out and sort of touching base with them. So we've got active programs within the leadership team to make sure that we're all reaching out and actually just checking off that, yep, okay, I've spoken to Bob or Sue or Jenny, etc., and then we don't leave anybody behind through that. And that's not just how we work and how are they working, but also reinforcing the message of what are we building, where are we going, and just making sure that there's that purpose and drive to the work that we are delivering.
So I have to ask, do you actually have anyone named Bob working there?
No Bobs. No.
Okay.
I've got a set of just standard names that I'll spit out because I don't like to name individuals. They feel funny.
Names that don't occur very much in these modern times. So, Monday is like a project management. I was consulting with a company, and they actually had a challenge talking about the day Monday and the software Monday. So they actually had to kind of say it that way. Let's see. So got some more. Got a good one here. I'm gonna actually put it on screen. It's talking about the agile process. So I'm gonna post that up. Are your customers okay with the agile process? Are they keen to see proof of concept and does anything unfinished freak them out?
That is a really good question, Jody, and it's timely. So, in chatting to Jace before we got going, how are things for you? We've got a big pitch that we're putting together at the moment, and the customer that we're sort of putting this proposal together for isn't an agile organisation. They're very much sort of around the government way of procuring and making decisions, and so the way that they look to run projects, the way that they look to procure, and the way that we actually need to be able to communicate to them is more at a waterfall level initially. They want to have an understanding of, this is what I will get. These are your commitments to me that we can effectively procure against and contract to. And then as you get further into the project, you'll move away from the waterfall and then more into the agile side of things. The confidence comes back, the procurement team and the budget holders have got that confidence, and they sort of will flex how they choose to work. We do have other customers who are very comfortable with agile. They run it agile internally, and that's what they expect. They see the benefit that it can deliver and the efficiencies. So it's a real mix.
Yeah, very interesting. So we're going to get together after the talk, which will be coming up in a few minutes, and we'll have a bit more of a chat. So any more questions, feel free, viewer, to pop them on the comments, and we can catch them when we get there. I'm going to say farewell for the minute and pop David back up on stage, who's going to share a bit of announcements and introduce one of our own organizers, Anthony. I'm very excited.
Thank you, Jason, Andrew. As our events are always free, we depend on the generous support of our sponsors. Given our recent transition to virtual events, it was so timely to have optimized the support for this aspect of our Meetup series. Certainly check out their free feature flag for phase releases, but also feel free to hop on Twitter and just thank them for their support. We're very excited about next month's event on May 27th, which will be World Product Day. Each year, all the product tanks in over 200 cities around the world try and have an event on the same day to celebrate and explore our craft. We're still confirming, but our speaker at this point will be Gibson Biddle. In 2005, Gibson joined Netflix as Vice President of Product. In 2010, he became Chief Product Officer of Chegg, a textbook rental company that went public in 2014. Today, he's an advisor for multiple consumer tech companies and is a guest lecturer at both Stanford and INSEAD. He will present on product strategy and will use Netflix as an example to review 5 different strategy frameworks to enable product leaders to define their product strategy. His sessions are very interactive on RSVP, interactive, not on RSVP, being a dating thing, very interactive, so RSVP on Meetup and block out the news slot for May 27th now. Now for tonight's main speaker, Anthony Lee, who is a product manager for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Anthony is also a ProductTank organizer, and after quietly organising Yakka workshops for over a year, we've finally convinced him to get up on the stage and share from his wealth of knowledge. Anthony's resume includes leading the world on the What If Android app and managing the development of self-service terminals and an in-store phone betting at Tats Group. He joined the ABC's product team 18 months ago to reboot the ABC News website, a very high-profile challenge. Given the impact of the bushfires, COVID-19 and fake news, product development in the media industry has never been so important to all of us. Tonight, Anthony will walk us through the journey of revitalising ABC News web presence, taking the site from a shabby number 3 to outpacing the competition to the point that the site's off days are now higher than any other rival's record. Please feel free to drop questions in the comments at any time so we can answer them towards the end. Thank you. Anthony.
Wow. Okay. So I'm new to this. Let's see if I can figure it out. Alrighty. And thanks for the generous intro. All right, here we go. Oh, man. All right, let's go with that. I'm hoping everybody can see it. All right. Just go ahead and text me if you can't see it, Jace. I'm just going to assume that you can because I can't see anything from here. Alrighty. So yes, this is what we were just talking about, what David was outlining. The success of ABC's news web product over the last 3 months has been quite significant. And yes, of course, there's been a big part of that that is fueled by news events that have been going on, and of course the massive news events with COVID-19. But we've been building up to this for some time now, and it's not entirely about the news cycle. There's a lot of great things that my team has been doing that underpins this success. So I'm just going to step back a bit, and I'm just going to give you my biased take on what a product manager is. Okay, not the owner of the backlog, not the master of Scrum anything, not the team's PA. I'm not interested in managing the devs' technical tasks that need to be done in order to deliver the item, and not a project delivery service. So what is a product manager? Like if you listen to some people, they're the CEO of their product. But unlike the CEO, product manager has very little authority. Product manager is not in charge, not by a long shot. The only similarity is that we're cross-disciplinary and that we need to lead by example through our love of the product. So the product manager is an incredible polymath, right? This guy that can do all of these things. Pick out Pantone colors, run the books, talk to design, customers, business, technology, be all things to all people. Yes, I wish it was that easy. I mean, it's one thing to be all of those things. It's another thing to be able to have impact through that lens. And one of the big struggles is there's already a lot of people doing these things. Like you get embedded in a team and there's already somebody who's talking to customers, already somebody that knows more about the business than you do. Design specialists, tech leads, everybody, every piece of what I just described as a product manager might be great at is divided up between the shared understanding of the team. And when it comes to design, or when it comes to any business domain, really, everybody's got a Venn diagram, just like we have one here for ProductTank and we put ourselves at the middle. Everybody's got a different lens for looking at this. And this is a really, really valuable way of looking at things, the intersection of viability, desirability, and feasibility. In this particular design, or this diagram by IDEO, incredibly well-respected company, they would purport that desirability is at the top. And it's an incredibly hard thing to figure out, like what customers really want. In some of my previous roles, working on big innovation projects, it's been very, very challenging to get the truth out of customers about what they will buy and how they will interact with your products. You make all of these bets on product features based on what customers told you they would love, and then you release it to market, and they don't love it as much as they said they did. And it's a very challenging domain to work your way through. Or you can go come at it from the other end, from engineering, and feasibility is the big thing. So let's just build what we can build. And I think that's a lot of what trying to talk to customers first is trying to mitigate, is being stuck in this engineering trap of being too close to the problem and just going after the things that you can do. And here I find myself weighed down by all of these things that need to be done. So another way of looking about it is, yes, desirability is at the top. What often gets forgotten is viability, unfortunately. The business at the end of the day is trying to make money from the things that we're doing. And okay, the customer may love it and we may be able to build it, but can we turn a profit on it? And even more importantly than that, is the organization even interested in doing it? And this, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working for very large corporations, TAB before the ABC, and yeah, it's not going to be a surprise to anybody that they're ripe with politics and personal agendas and people trying to find ways to create value in their own spaces. And new product features can be threatening throughout the organization. So that organizational alignment component is really quite large. So moving on from that to talk about strategy. I hear this word bandied about quite a bit without having a great underpinning of what it is that we're talking about when we say strategy. So before we get into anything else, I just wanted to give a little clarification on this. So when you say to yourself, or when you say to your friend, what is your strategy? What's implied in that statement? Like, when you say, what is your strategy? Are you talking about how you're going to sail the boat down the river or how you're going to get to the top of the mountain? Is that a frame of reference that you would apply that statement to? Typically, I don't think it is. Normally, it would be, what is your plan, not what is your strategy. Strategy implies that you don't really know where you're going. Strategy implies that you're trying to achieve something that's intractable and hard to get to. And the whole point of a strategy is that because it's unknown, you're going to have to put frameworks in place to be able to work your way through to that unknown. So this is a really, before I get onto that, sorry, yeah. So hill climbing is often talked about in this space and is very important. Many people within their specialist domains are very good at optimizing. And so the thing about optimizing is you put one foot after the other, continually looking for higher ground, but at some point you run out of higher ground. And then what are you going to do? You're at the top of the hill and you don't know where else to go. So you can start piling up rocks. You can make the hill bigger. You can put a building on the top of it. But all of these things are really, really expensive. And that's what you end up getting as you get very into the optimization end of your cycle. So a big part of what we're trying to do as product managers is to bring value to what it is that the team is trying to deliver and all of the conversations throughout the organization. And strategy needs to underpin that, because a lot of the time, the strategy, well, nearly always, the whole point of the strategy is there's no guarantee that you'll be able to succeed your goal, and it's quite opaque what it is that you're trying to get to. So this is a really great book on that, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And just to bring it right back to its basics, the author of this book proposes you need a diagnosis, you need to understand the problem, and you need to have a guiding policy. That's what's going to carry you through when you don't understand where to put the next foot. And then coherence of action in how you apply your guiding policy. This was another great book from quite a few years ago now, where Peter Thiel talks about the important thing is to find your contrarian truth, the thing that everybody else doesn't agree with, that bigger mountain that's out of sight. And the important way of being able to get there is to go back to first principles and not follow the same formulas that everybody else is doing, the same frameworks, the same ways of looking at the world, the same methodologies. If you're doing that, you just need to do it faster than everybody else because you haven't found a unique value proposition. This is another important thing that gets talked about a lot of the time these days is outcomes over outputs. It's a big catch cry of mine. But the problem is within large organizations, it's really easy to go back to outputs. It's really easy to start thinking, what's in HR terms, in employment assessment terms, in any given forum, it's much easier to measure how many arrows the person has shot, how many lines of code they've written, how many features they've shipped, than it is to measure whether or not they're on track to achieve a strategy, which we don't even know whether that's actually going to bear fruit. So Yeah, so I won't read that out for you. But that's the gist of what I'm getting at there. So my strategy coming into NewsWeb, and being quite cold to the problem. Of course, I was brought into the company because I speak the language of product management and all of the modern tools and talking to customers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, news is actually a pretty simple problem that has gone significantly off the rails in the case of the ABC's news presence. It was a very daggy looking website, and there's reasons that it had gotten to that point, mostly internal politics, legacy systems, struggle to stay focused on the problem sometimes, often off chasing shiny things that don't come to fruition. So my strategy with my team and my stakeholders was to grow love for the product with the people around me, modernize and simplify, and just keep things from getting crazy, which is a big part of, I think, the value of the ABC's news website to society, as more and more everybody's scrambling to produce ad revenue through so many different channels. The reason that people keep coming back to the ABC's news website is because it is dependable and it is not the insane house of many of the other news sites that are out there. So the strategic objectives, not to be confused with this strategy, the milestones along the way was treat stakeholders as clients. They had failed to receive love from the technology or product department for a great number of years. Grow my team. Not in terms of number, but their ability to understand and value product thinking, and ship, get stuff out the door. When I arrived, it had been a long time since there'd been any meaningful progress with the site, and there was a great deal of fear around any given release. And then on top of that, build the team's ability to think up and run and measure hypotheses. And once we get through that, start trying to understand where the real leverage points are, what numbers we need to measure in order to be able to affect our top line numbers. So the first thing there, of course, for me was build the team. And when I arrived, the team was in a bit of a state of chaos. Again, they hadn't shipped anything for a long time. And the designers and the developers were at war with each other. And my entire department wasn't on particularly great terms with the news desk. Luckily, ABC is not running the Spotify model. In my last job, I was across many more projects. And my job was much more about working with stakeholders, creating business models or lean canvases, or getting them prioritized. And then a team would be spun up to deliver on the things that had been discussed, and I would get involved at the other end to measure them, as well as a little bit of monitoring of the teams along the way. The problem with that is it makes it really hard to build team cohesion, and it does, in many companies, I think, degrade into lip service agile, because it is so hard to get a team that's been put together for 2 to 3 months to be able to deliver on an outcome for you. So basically, you would need to run a very tight series of workshops to define the scope, and then you'd need a project manager to make sure that it was delivered on time and on budget. And by the time you're finished, you're not able to leverage the full capability of every member of the team, because everybody brings an ability to understand the domain problem. And it's the team's ability to be able to work through it together that causes the magic to happen. Some other great books on this topic. The Culture Code is really great. One of the great things that I remembered about that is there's a certain personality type who keeps his chin up and keeps the team thinking of things in a positive light, can have an extremely impactful outcome. And just the way that you create ideas for the team to be able to hang their hat on is very important. This book, 9 Lies About Work by Harvard Business Review Press, is one of the best books I've read recently. And it comes back to everything is about the team. The reason that you get hired into a company, or the reason that you're attracted to a company, might be about company culture, but your understanding and your enjoyment of your work, at the end of the day, all comes back to your team. And it's about building that out, is how you create a successful love for what you're doing and the people that you're working with. So getting back to NewsWeb, about 3 months in, we were challenged with the federal election. And we weren't really given enough warning that this was coming. Again, everything was in tatters. But we'd made a few initial deliveries. We'd managed to get the masthead out. We managed to make the entire website go black for 20 minutes somewhere in my first month. But we got together, we rallied around this cause of making the federal election everything it could be. Yeah. And it was a massive challenge, because we were in the middle of a re-platforming effort, and which hadn't made a lot of progress. And now here we were coming together and saying that we were going to deliver an entirely new federal election experience on top of the new technology. But it gave us a rally cry and a way to galvanize the team. There were some challenges in there. There were definitely places where the team wanted to fracture and split apart. And it was my job at certain points in there to have some very tough conversations about, no, we're a team, we need to stick together, and we need to be able to work through this together. And the benefits were incredible. Because we'd been able to deliver this very challenging piece of work with a set deadline and an unmovable deadline, when we came out the other end of that, we had velocity and we had mateship. It's a big part of how I work as well, that I like to try to set extremely challenging goals and deliver on them, absolutely deliver on them, because that's part of winning trust with stakeholders. But some of the inner features of those goals, they get dropped. As the mountain range starts to come into view, then you start dropping sandbags so that you can get over the hill. The alternative is a lot less galvanizing for the team, is you just make sure that you set low and less ambitious quotes, and everybody just trundles along from day to day. So by the time we came out the other end of this, managed to tick off 3 of the big strategic objectives. 1, trust with our stakeholders. The team is starting to grow and understand what product is and how to be able to ship things together. And we're just making some initial inroads into what it is to be able to measure some of the hypotheses that we put in. We put some of those in with the federal election stuff. And we're still at this point a long way from understanding what the leverage points were to be able to make the product better. So we come out of the federal election. It's also part of my job to be, as I'd already been doing to this point, but now I sort of turn up the heat on what is product, and I'm busy explaining everything I know to all of the team, and they don't get it on the first pass. But it's about creating those memes and giving people a way to understand things is, again, about how we progress as a team. A couple of things that I leaned on really heavily at this time were Dan Olson's great book. And I really like this diagram, one of many, that sort of sets the context for what's really important about defining value. And user story mapping was invaluable. It's a fantastic process. It gave us a way to be able to, again, keep moving long before we actually defined what the user interface was going to look like. So when we're talking about spiking out things, it may be an initiative that we're heavily committed to, but the devs could start de-risking it while the designers were working on what it would look like and how we would brief it in with customers. One little thing that was actually really interesting in this book, which the team still refers to this day, is Jeff's assessment of most of the things that you're going to do are not actually going to move the product forward. And there were some some dodgy research behind it, but I actually believe it's true as well. And you see this time and again, you release something and worst case, it actually regresses you. And most of the time you didn't see the impact you were looking for, which is all the more reason that you just have to keep stuff flowing through the pipe, because everything's an opportunity cost. Every feature that you're assigning to be done is something that you can't be placing a gamble on and assessing your outcomes. Another thing that was really handy that I introduced later is this concept of a two-way door, which came from Richard Branson. And the idea is, if it's something you can do where you can walk through the door and it turns out it's not where you want to be and you can walk out again, then don't agonize over it so much. Just get on with doing it. Like, you don't need to run a ton of customer surveys if you can very quickly ship a feature and nobody's going to notice if you turn around and decide not to do it after all. Which is empowering, again, with that fear of making mistakes, fear of making deliveries. It helps us to keep things moving faster. So, but at the end of all that, rather than being a bunch of people that were busy fighting with each other, what we have today is actually a very harmonious team. We have a lot of really constructive, organic conversations going on all throughout the day. Every member of the team owns part of the problem. Our playbacks at the end of 3 weeks are replete with features, and everybody owns and can talk to their own features and what business value it creates. And even more importantly, they don't have to come to me all the time. They lean on each other. Okay, so how long is a piece of string? Rhetorical question. This is something that's really important to me in terms of where product management butts up against project necessity. And it's about organizational understanding of how things work, but it's also about how our own brains work. So the right-hand side of your brain is where all the creative stuff comes from. We all know that. The left-hand side is where all the maths and everything else lives. But here's the problem. If you're busy thinking about maths, the creative stuff can't get through. And you'll see this if you're sitting down and you're really focused on a problem and you step out to go and get a tea and a bicky, then it hits you. Whatever it is that you were unable to solve suddenly comes into focus, and you can go back to your desk and you can start working on it. It's because the left side of your brain blocks the ability of the right side of your brain to be able to produce the result you're looking for. The right side also, frustratingly, will not do tricks on time. You present it with a problem and it just sits there mulling it over until it's got a solution. The only problem is, if you're busy with busy work, it can't give you the solution. Paul Kelly, favorite artist of mine. I hope we all know this song, Love Never Runs on Time. And I would say profound insights, unfortunately, don't run on time either. So you've just got to set up the conditions to produce them and leave enough capacity and run a framework that's going to be allowed you to fold those in. Nothing worthwhile is easy. So again, NewsWeb is still a very complicated problem. Mostly from a technical point of view. You would think it would be easy, right? You just publish a bunch of articles. It's a simple CMS. It's just a very large version of WordPress, right? But unfortunately, no. These complexities, they grow like weeds. People think up ways of doing things and they pile on complexity after complexity. And then when you come along and you've tasked with what a challenge like my team is to do a replatforming effort, then it's very challenging to tease out what all of those complexities were intended to do. But I want to make a distinction between complicated and complex. So the picture we were just looking at was complicated. The picture we're looking at here is complex. Complexity is a form of, in terms of chaos theory, is where incredible beauty comes from. And it's because everything is not more complex than it needs to be, but the combination of all of those things in their complex patterns forms the world that we know it. And there are patterns in there. When you go down and you look at the structure of a leaf or a flower, they all have meaningful patterns, and that's what complexity is about, which is different to complicated. Complicated is bad, complex is good. And it's the simple solutions that you find after going through complexity that are what you're really looking for. Simplicity, on the other hand, before going through complexity, has very little value. So Oliver Wendell Holmes said this many years ago: I would not give a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but for the simplicity on the other side of complexity, I would give my life. Because that's the single beautiful thing that has been figured out by going through and distilling all of the complexity into the right solution. And this can be applied to teams too, right? So the simple way to start is spoken hub. You're at the middle and everybody does what you say. And then you move out from being in the middle. You have a democracy, maybe, hopefully a meritocracy. But within that system, if you can get everybody talking to everybody as they go, then that's where complexity comes in. And that's where the emergent behaviors happen, and that's where the brilliant ideas come from people working through these problems and being committed to the task. And it could happen while they're on the bus, or it could happen while they're going out to coffee together. It doesn't necessarily happen during your workshop, but the important thing is that you've got everybody involved and thinking about it, so that you've got this powerful engine for problem solving working well beyond what you could do as an individual. So, you know, this is what it looks like. It's chaotic, it's messy. I stole this diagram from a book on running workshops. This is a way to contain it into a workshop. But what we're doing in NewsWeb is like doing this on a daily basis. And yes, it does look a lot like some design processes, which are extremely powerful in their own right. But again, it's about trying to get a bunch of people in a room for a constrained amount of time to be able to push out a solution, which is different to letting the problem work itself out in its own time. It's a really good article there from the head of design at Airbnb, it's 5 years ago now, talking about what we really want people to do is not be looking to the designer to be solving all the design problems, but to instill a culture of design throughout the entire company. And this is what we've been doing with the NewsWeb team. So this is what it looks like. Every day, many different things going on with the members of the team, working it through, owning it. It's multi-threaded. It's also, a lot of it's yes, of course, it's my job to be able to rein in this chaos and be able to make plans around what it is that we're delivering. And most of our capacity goes to these front-of-mind problems, agreed front-of-mind problems. But at the same time, everybody's thinking through the problem in much more depth. It's a great book on the topic. I highly recommend you read it. Okay. So yes, it sounds like it's complete chaos, I know. But there is some rigor to it. If you ask, at one stage I was asked to map out what my prioritization process looks like. This is it. I'm not expecting you to understand it or even be interested in it, but it does go through a number of gates, and there is a standardized process that we do to decide what gets put into our process funnel and then delivered. But for me, the more important thing as a product manager is about finding value. It's not about the robotics of putting things into a roadmap. So how do we find value? Teresa Torres has got some really great thinking on this topic, which she got from John Dewey in a book that's like 100 years old now. But here too, you've got to flip between your ways of thinking. Read her article, I highly recommend it. But you've got to be able to flip between inductive and deductive as you go through your experiments. Some things will help you to generate ideas, and some things will help you to be able to build and test ideas. And as you flip back and forth between those two things, that's where the power of creativity kicks in. For us in NewsWeb, there was some lack of clarity around what the best tools to do any given task were when it came to talking to customers. So ran these exercises with the team to be able to map out which tools are good for which problem solving. And it's, where does it sit on the scale? Is it trailing or leading? Is it something that will tell us answers in advance or after we've shipped? Is it something that's going to feed our ability to come up with hypotheses, or is it something that's going to allow us to test our hypotheses? Great quote from Peter Drucker. Again, it's in the same space. It's not all the work that you do at your desk. It's the reflection on the work that you're doing that produces the insights. Okay, Agile. I've got my own take on Agile. Here's a piece of documentation from Agile that was produced 20 years ago. And I think everything on here is 100% correct. Processes over tools. Individuals over interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change. Brilliant, absolutely nailed it. Unfortunately, so Scrum predates Agile by 5 years. So here we are, quarter century later, and there's so much processes built up around Scrum and being able to deliver things in sprints and pre-quoting on what things are going to cost. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it can become a distraction from trying to figure out where the value is. So like, yeah, our old friend, the user story, and I've written many hundreds or thousands of these, but I would really question, does this format really enlighten people about what it is that you're trying to achieve and what it is that you're delivering? And I'm starting to tend towards, no, it possibly isn't. Meaningful conversations are much more important. And as the Agile Manifesto said, yeah, individuals and interactions. The biggest problem with Scrum for me is Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the space available. If you run a rigorous process of trying to pre-quote on what everything's going to cost, it will cost you that much or more, always. You can go faster than that. So what we run in NewsWeb is Scrumban. Yes, it's a thing. It's Scrum smashed together with Kanban. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. There's some really good things about Kanban, and there's some really good things about Scrum. The ceremonies in Scrum give a certain dependable outline for everybody to work to. But the mechanics of Scrum, I think we can do better. So just to talk a little bit about the work queue that goes into my team, there's a ton of different things that we have to deal with. Yes, there's replatforming stuff that I talked about, but there's also a number of different stakeholders that are constantly coming to us with their pet projects that they want us to deliver on. There's obviously things that need to be done as part of the news cycle for different events. And I'm just looking for my notes, so just give me a second. But it's a very gnarly, lumpy backlog of stuff that we need to deal with for a diverse set of stakeholders. Random support requests, support for editorial, etc., etc., etc. So the way I dealt with this is, and this again comes from Jeff Patton, is I said, okay, well, if you want us to do project work, if you just come to us and say, you must do this, then that's like the restaurant. You ask for spaghetti, we'll bring you spaghetti. That's project work. It's reactive, it's process driven. We do that. But then when it comes to the product work, the really important stuff, you have to come and consult with us. Don't tell us the solution you're looking for. Come and tell the team the problem and we'll work through it. And this is where flow becomes really important, and our ability to be able to work through hypotheses and understand and own the problem domain. And we do both of these in parallel. So the way I made that work is, again, leaning on user story mapping and some of the work of Jeff Patton. So the team in our day-to-day, we talk about boulders. We talk about the big business objectives that we're trying to achieve, epics, I guess you would call them. And we talk about them at that level, at stand-up. People don't come to stand-up and say, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, these are my blockers. You have to come to stand-up and you have to talk about what you've done to be able to move that epic forward. And everybody needs to, and we take the Kanban way of doing it, of walking the wall and talking to those epics, not talking to individual people's work. And then we've just got a bunch of stuff that gets stuffed into our queue that is much smaller than boulders. BAU, fixes, different requests, they all just go straight into the Kanban board. So we manage the smaller things, the rocks and sand in Kanban, and we manage the boulders through conversations and roadmaps. Oh, also the goal, brilliant book on theory of constraints. If you want to understand that stuff, that is the best book. So, yeah, like I just said, in our stand-up, we don't talk about what any particular person is doing. We talk about the task that we're trying to push forward as a team. And at a high level, that allows us to be able to think through the problem and understand what it is that we're missing and leverage everybody's ability to be able to work through the problem. When I initially started this, I didn't want to be at the center of it. So I got a bag full of walnuts and I wrote everybody's name on the nut. And I said, okay, every day you have to pick a nut and you have to be in charge of helping everybody else to walk the wall. And that's how we do it now. People initially groaned and rolled their eyes, but now everybody just gets up and does it. And many days, nobody even needs to pick a nut. Some team member will just volunteer. We know how it works and we get on and we do it. One thing that's often asked about Kanban is how can you make commitments to the business about when something will be shipped? How can you get that reliability that you get from Scrum? The way it works in Kanban is you look at past velocity and you use that to calculate the way things will be moving forward. You spend less time on estimating, but you make up for that by shipping more stuff. Having said that, we do have massive project work to do, replatforming. There are a lot of other teams that are dependent on us. There's a ton of money being spent. So we still run a lot of the standard processes, just we're a little bit more trusting in how we do it. And I tie it all together in a project management style so that other teams can interface with us and depend on us to deliver things by deadlines, which we always do. So flow, again, back to the theory of constraints and Kanban and a lot of things, these things are based on, flow is really important in this, but I won't bore you with this. I think we'll just skip on. This guy was an absolute legend in terms of being able to apply this stuff in the real world. This is a really great book on managing complex organizations, getting people to work together. A great quote from Stanley McChrystal was, you have to stop thinking about it like moving pieces around the board, and you need to start thinking of it as an ecosystem. Stanley McChrystal really understood systems theory, team management, and he was doing a brilliant job, which you would see in this book and the brilliance of his work. And then Rolling Stone wrote an article about him, and that was pretty much it. That was the end of his career. They said Rolling Stone branded him as a fool, and he was run out of town. And you can watch the movie about it on Netflix with Brad Pitt. Okay, so this is the last stretch. So I'll just run you through a little bit of what we're doing based on those things that I've just talked about. A really important thing is, and again, with our wider group of stakeholders, we talk about treating articles as product. So any given article is just like a product in its own sense. And there are certain things that can define whether or not that article will be successful. It's about, what time of day did you launch it? Who are you targeting with that particular thing? Was your keyword density right? How well are you matching with the trends of what people are interested in the market at this moment in time? And the news desk has a brilliant job of tracking all of this stuff. And my team does our very best to empower them with tools and ways of thinking about it to make that even better. And here am I, this goes back to probably 12 months ago now, but again, talking about the ecosystem and saying, well, it's really, a lot of the benefit comes in understanding how the different product verticals work together and how people flow between those assets. There's a completely different team builds the news app in Sydney. And there's whole different teams manage our social platforms and newsletters and what have you. But from a consumer's point of view, you don't care about that. You'll be looking at the news website on your desktop at work, and then you'll be looking at the app on the train on the way home, and then you'll get your newsletter over the weekend. And all of that in your mind is part of the cohesive, well, not so cohesive, but should be cohesive ABC News offering. And how each of those products supports each other is a big part of how we raise our game. And for me, it's about spreading that message broadly throughout the organization so that everybody can pull together to make that happen. One thing I didn't think, I had this on my wall for a long time, and I was thinking about this diagram on the dashboard of the old Prius. And I know it looks really ancient, but it's a really interesting visualization of where your energy is moving in your car. And it's quite intriguing to watch when you're driving around in one of them. When we're talking about the ecosystem and understanding the flow between our products, I thought, well, first of all, I just pasted this picture on the wall and kept talking to everybody about it all the time. But eventually I got to a point where I was like, no, I need to be able to make this into data that people can follow so that we can understand how we're performing. And so after a lot of messing around, I took a course on business analytics. I read all the books and did all the courses on GA and every other analytics tool, et cetera, et cetera. Went for a swim in our data, find different ways to mudge it together. And one of the most interesting visualizations I came up with was this one. And over the course of things, I've come to understand, and it's like having a child. Nobody gives you a manual when you start. But nobody really understood what news was made of when I started. But I can tell you today that the news website is made 95% plus of the news website is made of three things: the homepage, the just-in page, and articles. And we have a ton of other stuff that we need to support that doesn't generate anything like that amount of traffic. And when I say traffic, I'm talking in the millions of hits a day. Yeah, and as the head of distribution for news said to me one day, it's like, yeah, well, you might say those things are small, but to anybody else, they're actually quite big. Anyway, so this shows us what the flow is between our different assets, where people are coming in to any one of these pillars and how they're leaving from each of those pillars. And the one on the right shows you total usage, and the one on the left shows you unique usage. And it's a bit hard probably to understand here, but the unique usage one is saying that we send a lot of people come in from search or Facebook or wherever they come from to an article, and the next place they go to is just in. And that's not actually what we want. Homepage is the best place for us to be able to offer news. Sure, if you're a just in lover, you just want to see a list of all the most recent news, great, it's there for you. But we don't want to be recommending it to you if you've just come in cold to the site. And this chart shows us that we're actually sending 40% of that category of people through to just in. And it sort of highlights potentially a problem in the navigation. And the way we've dealt with that, you would see now on the mobile website, as you scroll down, a little thing comes up telling you, do you want to go back to news home? And there's a couple of other institutional and flow issues that we deal with that as well. This is one of those initiatives that it was like, gee, that'd be nice to do. The designer went home and thought about it, introduced it back to me in the hallway some 6 months ago, and now here we are. We're actually in a position where our understanding of the data and our ability to be able to deliver on something has finally come to fruition. Again, you've got to leave the door open, and you can't always expect it to run on time, but the more you do, the more you'll start producing really powerful insights. that is the end. Please look forward to the revamp of the desktop articles, which will happen early next week, because I know they're a bit daggy as well. And that will be most of the NewsWeb presence updated into the modern era of 2020 as of next week. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Anthony. I think I have to agree with many of the comments in the questions to the side. That's one of the best presentations I've actually ever seen. I also just wanted to say a quick hello to many of our international people that are joining us today. I've seen people from Denmark, the United Kingdom, and some other places. So welcome, and we're glad that you're getting some benefit from Anthony's presentation. It's really fantastic. I'd like to invite Anthony, Andrew, and all the ProductTank organisers up on stage now for a time of discussion, and we can cover off on some of the questions that have been in the that have been left in the comments.
Yeah, no, I've seen a few good ones come in, and this is our first time streaming live to Facebook too. So I saw some comments coming from Facebook. That was neat.
I got to say, it was extremely unsettling. I had no idea. Like, I can't see the audience. I'm just sitting here talking to myself. It's the hardest presentation I've ever given.
So you're unsettled. That was, again, like, let me just put one of these comments up. This is one of the best product presentations I've seen. All right, so
there's an easy one here from Liam. How do I balance resource allocation priorities? Well, it's pretty simple for me. I have fixed resources. I'm in a product team. I'm embedded in a team of 9 people, and the game for me is how much can I ship through that queue. It's more. There definitely is a massive balancing act to be able to negotiate what goes into the queue, but resources don't change.
Some excellent questions above that one. I like Jody Biddle's one, which is about managing stakeholders. That's pretty interesting. One is, how do you like to make gut feeling decisions?
That's a good one.
Who gets to do that? Whoever gets to do that. That was my second slide. You're not the CEO, right? Yes, you have all of this knowledge and ability, but you never ever. It's been years since I even dreamt of just being allowed to be able to do something without having to brief everybody in. But it starts with the team. There are times when I have a strong belief that we need to do something or other, and the team might resist it. So there again, it takes time. I've got to, I can't progress until I've built enough mind share around the idea. And that is something that's very hard to put on a project schedule. Stakeholder X is going to fall in love with this idea on Wednesday afternoon. It's just not going to happen. I'll have a chat with him in the elevator about it, and then 3 months later I'll have another chat, and then he'll tell some other senior executive. They'll think it's a brilliant idea, and they'll come back and tell me to do it. I can't guarantee when that's going to happen.
So, sort of, what about the stakeholders, though? Do you have stuff flying at you from all angles, ideas that are gut, and you have to kind of feed back and develop the culture of, let's be data-driven here, what's the substantive kind of evidence for that?
Yeah, we all have to deal with that, right? That's definitely a thing, because, yes, senior executives do beat their chest and ask people to do stuff based on gut. But you build up tools for dealing with it. A lot of it is deferral. Some of it is workshops. And the thing about workshops is you can, in a nice way, get people to look at their assumptions and show them that there are a lot of other people that are looking at it in a different way. Probably the most blunt way to do it is just data. And just go, well, the data does not agree with you, but that you don't make friends that way.
Yeah. So I think one of the ideas you sort of talked about on the workshops, for me, it's about containment. So yes, you've got your data, but actually being able to contain that stakeholder So giving them enough so that you are moving forward in understanding that idea and not humouring them or sort of taking the piss in how you interact with them, treating them with respect. But that's where you may spike on things. You actually explore what the need is and what the alternatives and options might be, and actually then be able to present back. So it's actually being able to contain that discussion, and you do then build a trust with your stakeholders that actually when I come to product, they do listen and they actually help me achieve the right outcome. They take me down the right path. I've had a few dead starts, but we've had some also really good outcomes, but you need to contain that effort.
Yeah, I agree. Trust is paramount.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's part of my prioritization process, to be honest. Like when I'm weighing up, should I do this or that? Sometimes, well, does it buy trust from me and my team? Is going to rank higher than I really think this is going to create customer value. But again, it's about strategy though, because the important thing is to create customer value. But what tactics do you need to be able to deploy to get to that point?
Another one here I think is a good extension on that. Stakeholder demands for output now when you believe it requires space for creative thoughts, so creating that space in need for creativity.
You have to keep delivering, right? And you have to keep delivering things that stakeholders ask for. I have a diagram that I didn't show. The bulk of what my team does is for other people. It's not for us and our product understanding. And we just try to wedge in some things, gradually build muscle, gradually build the ability to be able to lead the conversation and create product value. But in order to be able to do that, you need to do work for other people. So you contain it by making sure that you are actually shipping stuff. It can't be Boolean, right? It can't. That was something I learned or understood very early on. Is I was hired as a senior product manager for a product team, and now you're asking me to do a ton of stuff that's not product. It's like, but the only way I'm going to work through that is to earn trust by shipping on the things that have been asked of the team.
Priorities.
Yeah.
I use priorities as a tool, sometimes a weapon, because it's the way that you can defend your backlog and what you need out of your team. But it's the tool that allows a stakeholder to actually reflect back and say, this thing that I'm asking you to ship or to complete, if I have to weigh it up against everything else, where does that stand? And you can get some real soul searching from stakeholders when they're asked to prioritize in that way. Yeah,
I completely agree. Yeah. There's always way more work to do than so yeah. Somebody's got to do some soul searching.
It's just a question that came up a little ways back. I didn't want to just miss it, and I'm just going to pop it on screen here. You're speaking before the talk about both waterfall and agile. So, and this question came up in terms of how that transition works. Maybe you could elaborate on that just for a minute.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on the question.
I think. Sorry, I think that question was when I was sort of talking about my customers in going from waterfall to agile. I haven't found a tipping point. I haven't found a magical sort of objective to work to where a customer will make that change. It will depend on the trust, the relationship, the pieces of work that you're being asked to do, and the level of investment or risk that might be around those. So, Henrik, I don't have a magical formula that you can apply. Everybody's sort of unique.
All right. I saw, David, you snuck a question in from the...
I did, but, it's actually more interesting questions. There's been heaps of really crackers, actually.
Yeah, but sort of from your perspective, also working sort of in government, I might pop that up on screen. We can chew on it for a minute.
I think in many respects, it's what, Anthony's been talking about, which is the chat in the elevator or the lift is always a critical thing. And I think having champions who you can bring on the journey with, and I think it's that whole thing about many people being reluctant to actually show products until they're shiny, perfect, and everything is exactly the way it's meant to be, to actually saying, well, actually, this is good enough in the first instance for people to actually start playing with it and understanding how it's at work, and more important, it's going to be of value to our customers. So identifying champions within your organization that understand the value of the products and the projects that you're working on, get them to come on the journey with, early product developments and prototypes for them to try and play with. And then as things progress and you get some quick wins and people really like what you're doing, then you'll tend to find resources, in my experience, working in government anyway, being freed up, especially when people are happy and everyone can understand the value that you're actuty bringing.
You probably understand this better than I do, David.
I think it's
quite new to this whole non-profit space. It's quite crazy, some of the things that happen.
I think
just
the
because
ABC,
you don't have that lens of does it make money to apply to any given question, right?
and I think the ABC, more than many organisations, has a level of scrutiny that many non-for-profit organisations or even profitable organisations don't have to go through. I mean, whenever the ABC is doing something, there's quite a lot of political discourse about some people's views about the role of the ABC, and I'm sure that has some sort of material impacts on the day-to-day operations and doing your job either directly or indirectly.
Well, I could say, like, when I was working for TAB, yes, we wanted to create customer satisfaction, but so that we could make money. So that was always the deal breaker. It's like, does this thing make money? Yes, do more of it. Well, we don't have the ability to have that conversation in the ABC.
No.
Speaking of money, there was this P&L responsibility question.
Oh, good.
I'll start. No, not within the way SilverRail's sort of organised. There's lots of different parts to how a customer proposition comes together. My products are part of that, and so P&L responsibility is more shared or owned by the commercial function rather than product.
Me either.
And I love the quote from Louise, it's just popped up like something out of a 1980s movie. That's awesome.
I love the what said.
Yes, indeed.
Great, ladies and gentlemen.
But that's the thing, like I was talking about, and again, in that truckload of books where I've tried to decipher how you figure out what customers really want when they don't even know what they want. The one true way to figure that out is, will they pay for it?
It's that old analogy about if Henry Ford had asked customers what they want, they would like a faster horse that eats half the hay.
Yeah. A lot of people have a problem with that quote. I've brought it up in workshops and heard the entire audience groan.
I'll look to the comment column and see what people say next.
Yeah, but I mean, the point was, it is that thing that they just don't know what they want. And that doesn't mean that you as the product manager, in all your awesomeness, get to make gut calls. I think that's what people take an aversion to. They think that it means that you can just, be Steve Jobs and just do what you want. That's not what it means at all. It just means it's a really difficult problem to get to the center of what customers want.
Interesting, sort of for an inside story here on this special report style. Is there an interesting story on how that came into being, if you know?
Special report style.
Yeah, they weren't sure what to call it. She said that Katie asked, I absolutely love ABC's multimedia / special report style formats. I don't know if that has anything to do with your...
Are you maybe talking about live blogs?
Could be.
Which is like, if you look at the coronavirus right now, it'll just be a long list of stories tacked onto stories, tacked onto stories. And it's a bit more free-flowing than a typical article. That's an interesting story, actually, because a lot of people didn't want me to bet on that particular feature. Again, we're in a big migration effort, and particularly the engineering team was like, well, that's not going to get us to the point where we can say we've migrated the site across. Why should we dedicate any effort to that? But it's extremely high business value. The news desk values it very, very highly. Audience values it really highly. So I'd been to any number of workshops where I'd championed that particular feature. And I just got lucky because we pushed it live just as coronavirus was starting to take off. So just put rocket fuel under it.
It's really helpful to be informed through that. And a good one about MVP here that I think we could all kind of put our 2 cents in on. I think it's something that we struggle to judge with many things that we roll out. Know when to cut a corner, get it out the door, deliver less, kind of drawing the line around MVP.
Just don't use the word. Probably.
Yeah. Expectation management. It's just, you need good communication from the outset. Get people onto that journey like we were talking about. And if they can see what the value is that you're bringing, your ability to manipulate scope gets to be a little bit easier. So you've got different options in scope. You can choose to cut the non-functional side of things, or the behind the scenes things. If you really need to get out the door quickly, the easier corners to cut. I find I don't like doing that because you get the engineers very twitchy and nervous quickly, and you then bump into support functions that don't want to accept the product that you've shipped, which I don't blame them for. But if you've understood that need with the customer and showing them and having them understand what those points of optional scope are without compromising on that core deliverable they require, it makes it a lot easier to not so much cut the corner, but to delay that feature or that capability, and maybe delay for a very long time. But that's, again, back to prioritization.
I also think it comes down to the culture of the organisation that you work in as well too. So I hear in government circles, for example, hey, let's do a minimal viable product. Now that works if you're in a startup that can do an iteration and an update in 24 hours once you start getting feedback from your customers, and you can start ironing things out and you're basically doing live testing and fixing things. But in large corporations and sorry, this is a generalization, of course, but in general, in large corporate organizations and government, you to call something a minimal viable product, which kind of sets in place someone's expectations that there will be that iterations and those updates and that rapid progression, can actually really set in place a rod for your own back. So I think it really depends on the culture of the organization and what you just said before, Andrew, about expectations management and both internally and external, that when you launch a product, that when you label something along those lines, it can actually make life remarkably hard for you and actually annoy your key stakeholders and customers.
Yep.
Or even worse, it turns into debt.
Yeah.
People start using it, but it never really flourishes, and then you can't kill the bugger.
Oh, that's like a weed. That's interesting. I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Is there any other questions that you guys see that you'd like to address, or any other points you just want to throw out there for discussion?
Actually, Jace, someone just asked about they had to go whether or not we would be putting this up on our websites, because they were deeply impressed with both presentations, and they also wanted to know the books that Anthony mentioned as well too. So they would just like a bit of an update about how that's going to work post this finishing.
Yeah. The videos will remain on YouTube and Facebook for reference. So.
Great.
I'm happy.
Immortalized Anthony.
Oh boy. I'm happy to send out the slide deck. I've got some links in there as well that people might be interested in.
So subscribers on Meetup, ProductTank Brisbane, If you want to get the slides, just become a member and you'll get the message through that. Any other points before we sign off? No? Oh, good.
No.
All right, guys. Well, just really appreciate everyone coming together to share learnings while we're all so far apart, trying to stay connected. And I'll hand back to David with some closing remarks.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to reiterate what Jace was saying. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight. I recognize much of our days are focused on doing Zoom and Skype and all the other iterations of apps for video conferencing. So the fact that you've joined us this afternoon is immensely appreciated. In fact, it's even more important now than ever to stay connected as a community. Be sure to check us out on Slack. There's actually a Mind the Product Slack channel, which is a very valuable community of over 60,000 product people globally. Hop in and join the conversation. Google Mind the Product Slack. Also, please remember that if you enjoyed today's presentation, to register now for May 27th. It's World Product Day. It's our product day. Other than that, have a great night, and thank you very much for joining us.